Brandi Passante is one of those rare people who just has something. Call it presence, call it magnetism, call it whatever you want, but the moment she walked onto the set of Storage Wars back in 2010, audiences felt it immediately. There was nothing rehearsed about her. No carefully crafted TV persona, no media training showing through the seams, just a real woman with real opinions, a razor-sharp tongue, and a confidence that seemed completely effortless. Fans tuned in for the storage lockers and the drama of the auctions, but they stayed for Brandi. And more than a decade later, that has not changed one bit. If anything, it has only intensified. What has changed, though, is the conversation around her. Because while millions of people first discovered Brandi through their television screens, a whole new wave of attention found her through social media. Specifically, through a series of photos that she began posting on Instagram that sent the internet into an absolute frenzy. These were not professionally shot magazine spreads or carefully lit promotional images. They were real, raw, and completely unfiltered snapshots of a woman who had clearly made peace with herself and decided the rest of the world could either keep up or get left behind. The response was overwhelming, to put mildly. To understand why these photos hit so differently, you have to understand who Brandi Passante actually is and where she came from. Because nothing about her life was handed to her. She was born in 1980 and grew up in Texas in circumstances that she herself has described as turbulent and difficult. Her childhood was not the kind that breeds softness. She grew up with brothers who were rough with her, in an environment that did not leave much room for fragility or self-pity. That upbringing shaped her in fundamental ways. It gave her a toughness that is not performative, a no-nonsense quality that cannot be faked, and a resilience that would prove absolutely essential later in life when things got genuinely hard. She was shy as a teenager, something that might surprise people who only know her as the quick-witted, confident woman on screen. She has spoken openly about how she used to give people cold looks just to keep them at a distance, a defense mechanism born out of years of learning that vulnerability could be used against you. That contradiction, the shyness wrapped in a tough exterior, is actually a huge part of what makes her so compelling to watch. You get the sense that there's always more going on beneath the surface than she is letting on, and that feeling keeps people endlessly fascinated. Her early adult years were defined by financial struggle. She worked whatever jobs she could find, babysitting, waitressing, cleaning carpets, anything that paid. Becoming a mother at 23 added enormous pressure to an already difficult situation. Every bill was a challenge. Every unexpected expense was a crisis. That kind of financial anxiety, the kind that comes from genuinely not knowing if you're going to make rent, leaves a mark on a person that does not disappear just because circumstances improve. Even after Storage Wars made her a recognizable face and a relatively wealthy woman, Brandi talked about how the money stress never fully went away. That is not weakness. That is what real financial trauma feels like, and her willingness to be honest about it is one of the reasons people connect with her so deeply. The meeting with Jared Schultz happened when she was 19, working as a carpet cleaning assistant in California. He was her manager. By multiple accounts, including his own, he was not the easiest person to work for at the time. The story of how they got together is almost comically unglamorous. He liked her immediately. She was not interested. His own friends had to leave notes on his truck reminding him to treat her better. It took time, persistence, and a gradual shift in his behavior before she gave him a real chance. When she eventually did, it turned into nearly 2 decades together, 2 children, a shared business, and eventually a television career that neither of them had planned for or particularly sought out. The business they built together, a thrift store called Now, and then in Orange County, California, came out of desperation more than ambition. A previous attempt at working in the mortgage industry had failed. Storage auctions were suggested by a family member as a possible income source, and they threw themselves into it with very little knowledge and very little capital. The early days were grinding, exhausting work. They bought units, cleared them out, hauled everything back to the shop, priced it, and sold it, often for modest returns. There was nothing glamorous about it, but they were good at it, and more importantly, they were determined. When Storage Wars producers first spotted Jared at an auction, he caught their attention because of his energy and his willingness to take risks. But the show did not really come together until they visited the shop and met Brandi. Something about her presence was immediately undeniable. She was not trying to impress anyone. She was just there running her store, being herself, and the cameras loved her for it. The producers asked if she wanted to be on television, and her initial reaction was far from enthusiastic. She and Jared had children. They had built something quiet and real, even if it was financially precarious. Putting that on camera felt risky in ways that went beyond simple embarrassment. What would fame do to their family? What would it do to their kids? These were not abstract concerns. They were deeply personal questions about protecting the life they had worked hard to build. But they said yes. And the rest is television history. Storage Wars premiered in December 2010 on A&E, and Brandi and Jared were introduced to audiences as the Young Guns, a nickname that carried both affection and a certain amount of condescension from the veteran bidders who already dominated the auction circuit. They did not have the experience, the contacts, or the encyclopedic knowledge of antiques and collectibles that some of the other cast members had accumulated over years in the business. What they had was hustle, instinct, and an on-screen chemistry that was absolutely electric. Their first season was rough in ways that went beyond the learning curve of a new job. The physical demands of clearing units were brutal. The pressure of performing under camera scrutiny while simultaneously trying to make real financial decisions was intense. Brandi has said that there were moments in those early days when she genuinely wanted to walk away. But she did not, because walking away was not something her upbringing had trained her to do. The turning point came with a locker that most experienced bidders wrote off on sight. It looked like junk. Old furniture, dusty boxes, nothing that announced itself as valuable. Brandi and Jared trusted their instincts and bid $1,100, more than they were comfortable spending. When they opened the boxes back at their shop, they found an extraordinarily well-preserved collection of vintage silver coins, some dating back to the 19th century, organized and labeled with obvious care. That $1,100 gamble returned over $13,000. The show had its story, and Brandi and Jared had their credibility. From that point forward, the trajectory shifted. The cast members who had treated them as outsiders began to take them seriously. The producers recognized that the couple was not just good television in the way that conflict is good television. They were genuinely compelling in a way that made audiences root for them. Brandi in particular stood out. Her deadpan delivery, her ability to shut down nonsense with a single look, her refusal to perform emotions she was not actually feeling, all of it translated brilliantly to screen. She was not playing a character. She was just being herself. And that authenticity was more watchable than anything scripted could have been. The show ran for season after season, and with it came the kind of fame that fundamentally changes daily life. Not Hollywood fame, but a particular variety of recognition that comes with being on a popular cable reality show, the kind where strangers feel like they know you personally because they have watched you in your living room, metaphorically speaking, for years. For someone as private and self-protective as Brandi, that level of familiarity from strangers was not always comfortable. She adapted, but she never entirely let her guard down, and the reasons for that became painfully clear as the years went on. The harassment started relatively early. In 2012, Hunter Moore, a man who had built a deeply disturbing online presence around distributing non-consensual intimate images, posted a video and falsely claimed the woman in it was Brandi. The damage from something like that is not limited to the legal realm, though Brandi did pursue legal action, suing for defamation, invasion of privacy, and related claims. The emotional damage is harder to quantify. Having your name attached to intimate content you had nothing to do with, having strangers discuss your supposed private life in the most degrading terms, is a violation that goes to the core of a person's sense of safety and dignity. Brandi won the case, though the financial compensation awarded by the court was insultingly small. What mattered was the principle and the fight. She did not let it go unanswered. But winning a lawsuit does not undo the anxiety that comes from that kind of experience. Brandi spoke in later interviews about receiving disturbing letters from strangers, about eventually moving to a gated community because the alternative felt unsafe, about seeking therapy to process the toll that fame had taken on her mental health. There was a period where she was afraid to leave her own home. That is not a small thing. That is a woman whose life had been genuinely destabilized by the attention that came with being on television. She managed it, and she came through it, but she never pretended it had been easy. Through all of this, Brandi and Jared's relationship was quietly unraveling. Nearly 20 years is a long time, and the pressures of shared fame, financial stress, co-parenting, and the particular friction of working together constantly had taken a serious toll. By the time Brandi revealed in the season 13 premiere of Storage Wars that they had split up, it was not entirely surprising to people who had been watching closely. The on-screen tension had shifted from playful bickering to something with genuine edges. The warmth between them had cooled noticeably. Jared's comment that just because they were no longer together did not mean they could not both attend auctions, just separately, said a great deal in very few words. What came next was genuinely dark. In 2021, Jared was charged with a domestic violence battery offense following an incident at a bar in Orange County that allegedly involved pushing Brandi during a confrontation. He denied the accusations. The Orange County District Attorney's Office filed charges. Brandi chose not to discuss the specifics publicly, which, given everything she had already been through regarding privacy and violation, was entirely understandable and entirely her right. Jared did not return to Storage Wars after that season. The professional partnership that had defined both of their careers was over. Brandi emerged from that period with her dignity intact, which is no small thing. She had full custody of their 2 children, Peyton and Cameron, and was navigating single parenthood with the same practicality and determination she brought to everything else in her life. She had already made the decision to stop sharing images of her children on social media after noticing inappropriate comments from strangers. Her kids had told her they did not want to be on her social media, and she respected that immediately and without debate. The protection of her children had always been a priority, and fame was never going to change that. And then, in what felt to many followers like a significant shift in energy, Brandi started showing up on Instagram in a way she never quite had before. The posts had always been there, a mix of humor, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and occasional personal updates. But something changed. The photos became bolder, more confident, more deliberately striking, and the internet, predictably, lost its mind. The graduation photo in June 2021 was the one that really got people talking. She posted a picture with her 2 children at her son's high school graduation, captioned with something simple and genuine about being proud and grateful. The photo itself was not provocative in any conventional sense. She was wearing a fitted black top and jeans, her blonde hair down, looking like a woman who had dressed up for a meaningful family occasion. But the response was extraordinary. Thousands of likes, flooded comments. The overwhelming consensus was that she looked genuinely stunning, and the authenticity of the moment, a real mother celebrating a real milestone, made it land differently than a stage photo shoot ever could. She seemed to notice the response and, in true Brandi fashion, leaned into it without apology or performance. A few months later, in September 2021, she posted a full body shot in a tight red skirt and white tank top that went comprehensively viral. The comments were effusive to the point of being overwhelming. Fans who had watched her for over a decade reacted as though they were seeing her for the first time. The confidence in the photo was palpable. She was not posing in the stiff, self-conscious way of someone trying to look attractive. She looked like a woman who had simply stopped caring what anyone thought and discovered that freedom was enormously becoming. Then came the tattoo reveal in October of that same year. A small bird and the word free inked on her finger. The caption she wrote acknowledged escaping a difficult situation, a clear but measured reference to everything she had been through with Jared. The photo was striking on its own terms: low-cut black top, tousled hair, an expression that was simultaneously vulnerable and absolutely fierce. But the combination of the image with those words hit people hard. This was not just a hot photo. This was a woman marking her own liberation on her own skin and sharing it with the world. The response was overwhelming and almost entirely supportive. People recognized the weight of that moment even through a small social media post. The green dress photo from March 2024 came from a thrift event in Los Angeles and was not even one she had staged herself. A fan captured it and it spread rapidly, accumulating thousands of shares within days. The dress was clingy and the neckline was striking, and the hemline was short, and Brandi looked completely at ease in all of it. The wild blonde hair, the signature smirk, the total absence of any attempt to look like something she was not. At 45 years old, she was redefining what that age looks like with casual, effortless authority. The question people kept asking, sometimes with genuine curiosity, and sometimes with a kind of disapproval that said more about them than about her, was why. Why was she posting these photos? Why the bold outfits, the confident poses, the knowing smirks? The answer, for anyone who had actually paid attention to Brandi's story, was not complicated at all. She had spent years in a relationship that wore her down. She had survived harassment, invasion of privacy, a domestic violence incident, the unraveling of a nearly 2-decade partnership, and the relentless scrutiny that comes with being a public figure. She had come through all of it. These photos were not thirst traps in the cynical sense of that term. They were proof of life. They were a woman saying, clearly and without qualification, that she was still here, still herself, and completely unwilling to be diminished by anything she had been through. There was also something specifically powerful about the timing. She had paused her Instagram activity in 2022 following the death of her father, which was a genuine and deeply felt loss. When she returned to posting, there was a noticeable shift in how she was showing up online. The playfulness was still there, the humor, the self-awareness, but there was also something more settled about her. Less defensive, more grounded, like a woman who had done some serious internal work and come out the other side knowing exactly who she was.